All right, it hit 7:02. We'll get started. Welcome, everybody. This is our sixth K12 NRCDP webinar, last of the year. Really look forward to the conversation and see a lot of familiar names and a few faces. So welcome back. We will have another slate of webinars for 2024. Look forward to communication on that in early January, where we'll at least present the first couple of webinar dates and speakers and topics. So stay tuned for that in early January, and hope everybody has a wonderful holiday and has some time with their family and friends. So I'm going to turn it over here to Dr. Rolston. Dr. Rolston is the director of the Mapping and Engineering Neurodynamics Laboratory at Brigham and Women's Hospital, Harvard Medical School. He's an associate professor there and a functional neurosurgeon and academician. He's also written a paper on this topic that was published this year, maybe 4 or 5 months ago or so. And I'm sure we'll hear from some of that. The topic is job negotiation for neurosurgeon scientists. So thanks, John, for doing this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thanks for the invitation. So welcome, everyone. Again, so I'm John Rolston, and I am a functional neurosurgeon at the Brigham. So I do mostly epilepsy surgery and movement disorder surgery. But through the K12 program and the Emerging Investigators program, I've had a lot of exposure to this larger community, and was thinking a lot about ways to get the kind of hard-fought information that I accrued during my different job hunts, as well as all the friends I have, into a way that could be useful for other people. So this is hopefully a distillation of that. That's my email address up there. If anyone has any other questions, please feel free to email me at any time. And during this this presentation, it's okay to ask questions or unmute yourself. It's a pretty small, intimate group. Here are some disclosures and acknowledgements. So most of the images that I'm going to show will be generated from DALL-E, so they're computer generated ones. These are some Lego sets fitting the theme of job negotiation for tonight. And then there's one figure by Lauren Banco, who's a talented medical student who created this infographic that we used for the paper that Greg just mentioned. So today we'll talk about the different things you should consider or could consider when trying to negotiate a job as both a neurosurgeon and a scientist. So not just an academic neurosurgeon, but one who's going to actually do that specific the neurosurgeon-scientist combo, so have a lab and do cutting-edge research to try to move the field forward. The things that we'll think about are choosing a position. So how do you choose of the many positions you're going to be offered? How to deal with protected time, how to find dedicated space and keep that space, how to get support or leverage support from your department or the university, how to negotiate a startup package, which is very important, and the issue of compensation, which comes up a lot as you're starting. I also will have a few polls or interactive questions here that I was hoping that people could participate with. So here is a QR code. You could scan that on your phone, or you can go to slido.com and enter these numbers, and that should give you the ability to take part of this. And if anyone needs this again, I can always pull it up again, and it should show up when we actually get to the point of entering or answering questions. So the first of these 6 major questions to think about is how to choose a position. So the first, questions that I've heard a lot from different colleagues who are looking at this and how to pick between the different job offers they have is, first of all, when should you start applying for all these jobs? There's no perfect answer for this, but often it could be a couple of years before you finish fellowship or finish residency, or a year before. It really depends on the job market at the time and how competitive you are as an applicant and what kind of role you're looking for. In general, the earlier you start applying, the better chances you'll have of kind of carving out a niche for yourself. At the same time, some jobs don't open until pretty soon before they need to be filled. So if some things happen unexpectedly and a practice will need a new faculty member within the next few months, so that's the time you want to be applying for that particular job. So somewhere in that year range is probably a spot that many people will look at. but there's nothing wrong with starting a little bit early. And even if you start late, you're still going to find a job. How do you identify job openings? Many different ways. There's going to be formal postings. So you'll find actual job listings on university websites or hospital websites. There's going to be people that advertise on social media. There's sometimes advertisements in journals. So some of the bigger journals will put advertisements for particular positions on there. Different society websites can have career path listings. Another big one is word of mouth. So don't hesitate to reach out to all your friends or connections and ask them if they know of any programs that are looking for someone like you, or if they've heard of anyone that might be looking for a junior partner. And then the last one is cold calling. So it's okay to reach out to the chair of a program that you're interested in or the division head. Best to do both rather than just the chair and not the division head. That could be seen as trying to bypass them, which could be a little insulting to someone that you're going to be working for or with for a long time. So good to reach out to everyone. Keep everyone aware that you're looking for a position. Don't want to blindside anyone. Of the different types there are, the different practices, there's some other questions you can ask, like, is this an academic position you're looking at, or an academic hospital, or is it private practice? You can still do research in private practice. It's just different. Will there be a university association with this position that you're looking at? So will it be associated with some place that has access to graduate students or a lot of resources like that or not? And then the overall geography, like, is this going to be an urban environment, which has very different considerations for cost of living, as well as the kind of competition you might have, versus something that might be more rural? All these things are really personal preference when it comes to a lot of that, but it's something you should ask yourself when you're looking around. So here is our first question that I would love to get people's opinions on. This will be educational for me too. So what do you think are the most important factors for choosing a job as a neurosurgeon, neuroscientist? And you can just type it in. And this could be something as simple as, like, salary, or it could be mentorship. Oh, lab space is a good one. All right. These are great. So we're starting to see some things about the chair, which is critical. So you want to work at a place where the chair is supportive of your research or knows what research is. Spouse happiness is critically important. If you have a partner that you're moving with, want to make sure they have the ability to work with you or move with you and have something to do, and are at peace with the location. Case mix, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but whether you're going to be assigned kind of general neurosurgery with not as much opportunity to practice your subspecialty, or whether you get pure subspecialty and nothing else that's more general. Startup packages, the residents that you'll be working with, the history of success in the department. These are all excellent opportunities. Oh, a few more. Grad school, if they're associated with a grad school location. Excellent. So those are all things that you should definitely be considering, and I'm glad that you kind of are already prepared. But some other ones to ask when you're looking at different programs. So let's say that you have narrowed it down to a few. One is the kind of practice type questions to ask about it. So what is the catchment area of the hospital you'll be working at? This means something like, if you are in a large city, is it going to be patients just from that city or from neighboring counties, from neighboring states? My first job at the University of Utah, we had patients from Utah, but also from Nevada, from Wyoming, Montana, pretty large catchment area. So it's important to kind of know where those patients might be coming from and how many patients you're going to be getting. If it's a very small catchment area and not very dense, it might be a lower patient population than a larger one. Another important thing to think about is, what are the competing hospitals that you'll be up against? So if you are doing a specialty that there's a lot of representation of other people that are doing the same thing, it might be harder to get a name for yourself versus if you're the only game in town. So be aware of that. And then the insurance landscape matters a lot for your job too. So there are some hospital systems that only take a certain brand of, or a certain subset of insurances. So again, in my first job, the major competing hospital took one major insurer, and then my hospital did not take that insurer. So a lot of patients were forced to go to one hospital or the other based upon their insurance rather than by choice. Where I work now, there are many hospitals that take identical insurance plans, so the patients have a lot more choice about which one they go to. And that kind of changes how I have to engage with the community and how much harder I might have to work to get those patients. Aside from the practice part, there's the academics. So someone mentioned this in the last slide about wanting access to graduate students and access to good quality graduate students. That can only happen if you are part, or usually it's easier to happen if you're part of a university system. There are some hospitals that are partnered with nearby universities, but some that don't have that kind of relationship. It's harder to get grad students in a lab if you don't have an established relationship. Not impossible, but a little harder. Not that you necessarily need graduate students. There are many ways to do research. There's postdoctoral researchers, research assistants. But if that's one of your missions is to mentor a graduate student up to a PhD, then you need to make sure that you're in an environment that can do that. And that might require an adjunct appointment in a different department that is a degree granting department like neuroscience or biomedical engineering. So when you're looking at different jobs, make sure that you're talking with those other departments and make sure that they are supportive of you having an adjunct, supportive of you actually being a primary mentor on a graduate student. And then more largely, are there people in that university or department that you could collaborate with or outside? So if you have research that might involve biomedical engineering, are there biomedical engineers you get along with that you would be happy to write grants together with? So kind of sussing that out before to see what that infrastructure, that support structure would look like is great. Aside from academics, there's industry connections. So some researcher labs want to have more of an industry bent or try to commercialize their findings. So if it's nice if you have the opportunity to find a place that has good industry or industry partners that are nearby geographically, so that it's easy to go there and kind of work on stuff together, only if you're interested in that industry partnership. And then also related to that, you need to make sure that the job you're looking at allows or supports that kind of consulting or industry support. Some are much more guarded about that and want to reduce the apparent conflicts of interest. Others are more supportive of developing new entrepreneurial type activities with their faculty. So getting an idea of that beforehand rather than being surprised after is important. And then a lot of the messages from the last screen talked about culture. So this is where having a department chair who either is a neurosurgeon scientist or has a department that they have cultivated that has a track record of supporting surgeon scientists is good. So when the department chair has this as a personal career path, they know kind of what it takes to run a lab and be a neurosurgeon. Or if they have many people in the department like that, they can see it and you can see how successful they've been. You can look at the department and see if there are other people that have funding and how successful they've been with getting funding. And then that could be a future mentor for you once you identify those people. You can still be very successful in departments that don't have a track record of this. And sometimes that could be a good thing. So if you're the only person in a department with NIH funding, that is maybe a good feather in your cap and might make other negotiations easier in the future. But certainly having an understanding of the culture and seeing that there is this support for research ongoing, especially neurosurgeon-led research, gives you some confidence in what the department's looking for. Next thing in our big list of the 6 pillars or considerations is compensation. So this is the poll I'm actually most excited about. So what do you think is a fair starting salary for a neurosurgeon neuroscientist? I think Greg's going to put 0, maybe. That's right. So pretty, we have about 11 respondents and the majority are somewhere north of 500,000 and the other parts are right less than that. So maybe something around 500,000 is what a lot of people are expecting. So that's for a neurosurgeon. So now what if you were a straight PhD? So a straight PhD, not a neurosurgeon, same question. Okay, so everyone is putting a much lower number than they did for the neurosurgeon, which is fact-based. So that kind of highlights this distinction about the salary that you're going to get, the compensation that you're going to get based upon those two identities that you might have. So surgeon compensation, forget the research, compensation is often based upon base salary plus some incentive. There are programs that are purely salary. There are ones that are purely incentive, but often the most frequent I've seen is a base plus an incentive. That incentive is determined often by clinical productivity, which is measured by things like RVUs, so relative value units, which is tied to CPT codes that you perform. Some other times it's tied to direct billing, so how much you're charging. Other times it's tied to a payment, so how much cash you're actually drawing in from the patients. But that is where the money that's coming to pay your salary is derived from, is often the professional fees that you are generating for your department and hospital. Taking a step back, as a surgeon, when you perform a procedure, there are usually two pools of money that are offered at the end by the insurance companies. One is the professional part of that, which is, again, attached to your CPT code that you charge. And the other part is the facility fee, which goes is tied to the DRG, the hospital. And it's also, it's important as you are developing your identity as a neurosurgeon, especially as you start out in practice, to get a feel for how much money you are generating, both in terms of professional fees and in terms of the facility fees. And that knowledge of what you're generating can help you then advocate for yourself, either to the hospital or to the department, which is handling the professional fees, when you need additional resources. So getting an idea for what you are bringing them can help you understand what your value is. There's other ways to generate or to get money, sometimes from the hospital. So there can be just direct grants from the hospital, realizing that you are a great investment. They might just fork over money. Sometimes having administrative roles like program director for a fellowship or a residency program can have salary tied to that. Sometimes some places give you a set fee for call coverage for each call you do. And there's other ways to kind of build that pool up. So that's the surgery side of things. The researcher side of it is different. These are mostly fixed salaries. That's the most common mode of payment I've seen for people that are PhD only and are non-practicing clinical. That money is often derived from grants that the person brings in or departmental support. And that departmental support is usually tied to some sort of service like teaching, being a director of graduate studies, or endowments that the department has. Often grant funding can be used to offset that service. So you can buy yourself out of teaching if you are successful in getting a lot of revenue from grants. So we'll keep that distinction in mind. Back to the question of what is a good salary. There's a recent survey from Doximity that shows that the average annual salary, so average for all neurosurgeons, is about $773,000. But that's for all neurosurgeons at all stages of career, and not specifically for ones that are doing research. There are a couple of resources that you should be clued into. There's the American Association of Medical Colleges Faculty Salary Report, which you have to purchase, and then also the NERVS survey, so the Neurosurgery Executives Resource Value and Education Society Socioeconomic Survey, which again is billed for, but goes into much more granular detail, like a functional neurosurgeon that does 50% clinical. This is the average number of RVUs they generate. This is the average salary that they've seen in these surveys. So this gives you a much more fact-based idea of like what the normal or sort of prevalent salaries are. So to put some more nuance into this, or just to understand the problem better about how much you can ask for, how much you should get, we'll think about a hypothetical chairperson. So if this is your chair and this is your salary, for instance, so this is what you are being paid for by your chairperson. This is if you are pure clinical, for instance, your revenue might be higher than that salary. In which case, your chairperson would be very happy. So in this case, they have this revenue that you are bringing in, and they are giving you less than that revenue. So they are able to use that surplus to do all the sorts of things that are important to do to keep the department in good health. Now, let's say that you are more of an academician neurosurgeon, but you want the same salary. Here, because you are doing all that research, you're not doing as much clinical work. So the revenue that you're bringing in, whether it be by grants or by RVUs, is going to be less, which might make the chairman a little, or chairperson, in this case, Matt Damon, a little more contemplative about what to do about this situation. So where does this shortfall come from, or how is this shortfall going to be handled if your clinical revenue is not up to your salary? So another interesting poll here, or not, this is more of a word cloud thing, but we've been talking about salary specifically, but there is a lot more that you get besides pure salary from your department. And this will help, again, like understand like what is reasonable to be asking for. So what are things besides just like the paycheck they give you that they're also forking over money into? Great. Yeah. So malpractice insurance is huge, very expensive for neurosurgery. Physical facilities. So someone is paying for the clinic space, the building that you have your office in, your janitorial services. Your advanced practice providers, so APPs, staff like MAs, benefits like retirement. All of these things are expensive, and in some ways, far going to exceed the amount of your salary when you start to add them all up and document them. And yeah, someone mentions direct, indirect costs. We'll get to that really specifically pretty soon. So that's when we looked back at this previous one. If your revenue is just that tiny bit over your salary, that's not good enough to cover all those benefits that the department is offering you in terms of personnel, malpractice, facilities, ways to keep your practice thriving. So that's another way to kind of understand the value that you bring and that you are extracting is trying to look at your practice, your division of one essentially as a profit and loss center. And some departments will actually give you that information once you start, and they'll show you exactly how much you are, being given in the terms of, supporting an MA, supporting a nurse practitioner, facility fees like office, your trips to, AANS or CNS and the airfare associated with that, as well as the exact amount of money you're bringing in from grants and from clinical practices. Some places will not be as good about showing you the grant money in that clinical profit and loss statement. So it's incumbent upon you to try to make sure they do. But again, there's, when you think about what you're bringing in and then what you're costing, you have to include not just your salary, but all this other stuff when trying to think of what is a fair compensation package. So let's say that there is a shortfall. Let's say that you're bringing in your clinical revenue, but you're doing so much amazing research that you're not in the OR as much as you could be if you were not doing that research. So now you're costing the department perhaps more than you were bringing in. How are you going to pay for that? Where's that extra money going to come from? One way is grant funding. So if you are very successful in bringing in grants, that's great. That can help compensate for that shortfall. But the salary cap for the NIH is $212,000. And we saw from all of your estimates earlier that you think you deserve far more than that. So 50% of an effort on an NIH grant will give you 50% of that salary cap, so $106,000. That is not going to be 50% of those salaries that you were suggesting were adequate earlier. So if you are very successful and you took half of your clinical time and put it into an R01, all that revenue that you could have been generating clinically is no longer there and is being replaced with a small fraction of that, or a fraction of that. So there's still some shortfall left over, even when you're wildly successful with R01 funding. Other ways to address the shortfall, philanthropic funding. So if you're able to get a gift from a grateful patient or someone else, that could be wonderful to use that funds in any way you can. Most institutions that I know of offer specific training to help you do this. It is uncomfortable the first times you do it, but the institution wants you to get better at this, and they will invest resources to train you to get better at it. And it's often about easier than you think, because it's about listening for cues. So some people will talk about how grateful they are to you, and it's okay to start talking about to kind of use that as a cue to talk about the research you're doing, and kind of make that introduction to one of the philanthropic officers at your institution. Another way to balance that shortfall is, again, maybe hospital or university support. So if you have a service role like a program director or fellowship director, that might have some additional cash flow, which can help balance things out. In the end, if there's still a shortfall after that, you're going to need to justify the value that you bring. So be able to defend why the department is going to give you more than you are bringing to the department on pure cash basis. And so there, it's important to kind of start thinking about why the department hired you as a neurosurgeon scientist, why they wanted someone to do research rather than just do more RVUs. That could be that they're looking for high-profile publications. They could be looking for new surgical techniques that only you can provide. Maybe there's a niche surgical role, so maybe they don't have a person who can do MIS spine, and they need a person like that. So then you have to kind of get a sense of how much they value these contributions, and do they value them enough to basically support you in that shortfall, to give you the salary you're asking for that is above and beyond what you're bringing in from the clinical revenue and the grant revenue you're generating. So difficult conversations to have, but as long as you understand where the money's coming from, and then what value you provide, it's easier to have these conversations and understand what you might be worth. Okay, next major component of the negotiation is protected time. I see some chats. Let me just make sure I'm not missing any. I think they're all AI talking to us. Okay. So for protecting your time, here's another poll. So how many days should you be operating every week as a neurosurgeon scientist if you're running a lab? I do not have 6 and 7 up there, as I think that's too much. So most people say a couple days a week. Some people say 1 day a week. Those are all very mature answers. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. It really, as we'll see, it's going to depend on some other considerations. But almost no one is saying 3, 4, 5 days a week. That's probably too much to have a really strong research arm. So when you start to think about how you're going to divide your time and protect your time, it's good to start thinking early about how you're going to split yourself up between your clinical work that you're going to do, which is clinic, time in the OR, answering my chart messages after work, versus the research you want to be doing. And then the other areas that are important, so education, whether you'll be lecturing to residents or directly teaching residents, or actually teaching classes in the grad school. And then administration, so things like if you have to serve on some committees like the IRB or a value assessment technology committee, all of those take time too. And so kind of think ahead to what percentages you would be likely to allocate yourself in for these. It's almost impossible to work at a major academic department without doing kind of some mixture of all of these, and usually picking a couple that you're going to be really devoted to, with a couple others that are kind of the side ones. Also important to know when you're thinking about this, some grant mechanisms require a specified amount of protected time for research only. For the K08 and K23, which are the career development awards from the NIH, the kind of marquee ones, they demand 50% protected time for research from the NINDS, and other divisions will demand 75% protected time. So it's easier to imagine how that's feasible in different disciplines, harder for surgical disciplines to be doing only 25% clinical. But if you're pursuing that pathway to go try to get one of these career development awards like a K08 or K23, you might want to get or make sure that you've had this discussion with the chairperson earlier, that they know that is your mission to have 50% protected time. because when it goes time to apply for that grant, they need to write a letter that says, I guarantee this physician 50% protected time for research. And so they need to know that what they're getting into beforehand. Also, keep in mind that there's no truly protected time as a neurosurgeon. If there's an emergency with your patient, you usually have to deal with it. There are some practice models where everyone kind of is a little bit fungible or more commoditized. So like some trauma practices I've seen, when it's your turn to be on that week for trauma, you take care of anything that comes on, even if it's a patient that someone else operated on, because it's considered more of a service model. Those can be much more easy to keep really guarantee protected time, but a lot of us don't have that privilege. To sort of get an idea for what this corresponds to, like actual schedule per week, if you're 50% clinical, 50% research, try to think of, how many surgeries you want to be doing in a month or a year, and then start working backwards at how you can accomplish that. So if you wanted to do, 20 surgeries a month, that's about 5 a week. How many OR days would you need to do that? That's going to depend on how quick you are, how fast the surgeries are, if you can run 2 rooms. Some places you can't do that, or some places you can't do that until you're associate professor. If you have support, so a fellow or maybe even a PA that can come to the OR, that can make things a little more efficient. But try to think of, what kind of volume you'd like to be doing to remain competent or generate data for research, and then how often you'd have to be in the OR to do that. And then the clinic schedule kind of follows easily from that. So if you know you want to be doing a certain number of cases per month, you need to build in enough clinic time to accrue those patients. And that again can be, how much time you need in clinic to actually generate that will depend on if you're really easy to, or a fast talker, or someone who can, see a new patient in 20 minutes versus an hour. If you have support staff, so if you have a scribe, that's a little bit easier than trying to do it all yourself, or if you have an APP. And then also really important is the hit rate of your subspecialty. So some subspecialties like mine, functional, a lot of people that come to see me have already been seen by a neurologist and recommended for surgery. So we have a very high chance that they will go on to surgery when they come see me. Other disciplines like spine can sometimes not be that way, where a lot of the patients that come in are still being worked up and managed with non-surgically or conservatively before going to surgery. So again, kind of think about how much clinic you need to get to those case numbers. Some other ways to really kind of protect your time that are more practical, things that I found useful are actually scheduling research like on your calendar. So if you want to do something, like if you have a grant deadline coming up, it's okay to put on your calendar like a 2-hour block to work on a specific AIMS page. That way it's on your schedule. You see it. If your assistants have access to your schedule, they will see it and be able to know that this is time that you've set aside, that you're not going to be pulled into a different meeting or some other maybe even clinical duty. It's also okay to use your APP or fellow. You want everyone in your team, including yourself, to be working at the top of your license, as they say. So doing the work that they're most qualified to do. So fellows and APPs are very qualified people, and they can do a lot to help you out. You don't have to micromanage everything, even though it's kind of appealing to do so when you first start out. And then learning to say no. So you're going to be, when you start out, asked to join every committee and do all sorts of things and help write papers and grants. You have to make sure to triage some of that and pick things that you're truly interested in and going to do a good job on. If you don't have the time to do a good job on it, don't agree to do it. That won't help you in the future. Fourth one is support. And by this we mean how the different jobs can sort of help you with other parts of infrastructure for your program, your research program, as well as your clinical program. So when I think of the support, I think of 2 different domains. One is in the clinical, and the other is more researchy. So for the clinical support, this can come in the form of an advanced practice provider, so a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant or a medical assistant or even a nurse. They can help you in the outpatient realm, so helping with clinic or helping take out sutures or dealing with some postoperative infections, and doing a lot to help free up your time to be in the OR, or to kind of take a step back and work in the lab some days. Inpatient APPs are also, they do a very similar role. Some places will give you one APP for both domains, outpatient and inpatient. Others have separate pools. Inpatient ones sometimes it's easier to get funding for them from the hospital versus the outpatient ones, which are often funded by the division or department. Residents can be incredibly helpful, but keep in mind that residents are there to be trained, not to be used as labor. So they are support, but you should not be seeing them as a way to get out of doing work. They are there to learn things. And if it's not really an educational experience, you should kind of reevaluate how you're utilizing them. Administrative support. So this is things like a secretary. They can be very useful for scheduling, for travel, many, many more things. Organizing just a lot of the research you do can be very helpful in the clinical work. Well, some of that is getting a little bit easier to do by yourself. So for things like scheduling appointments, there's many, many apps now that can do that for you and take some of the burden off, which can be helpful for you to have some control over this and maybe not lean on the admins as much. Research support is absolutely critical to get your lab off the ground. And so here we're talking about grants management teams. So these are the people that are going to help you submit your grant through the Office of Sponsored Projects, route it to the correct people. They help with the budgetings. Every university or hospital system is different for how they require the budgets to be notated and how they the different things they require for fringe and benefits. And they also have a lot of institutional knowledge about how to run these. So if you can find a department of neurosurgery that has a grants management team within inside that is specific for neurosurgery, that is wonderful. Not every place has that. Some of them you have to rely on. If you don't have one at the place you're looking at, maybe a department that you have an adjunct appointment and could be the source of that. So for instance, if you're doing a lot of neuroscience research, maybe the neuroscience department has a very strong grants management team that you could utilize for your grants as you're getting started. For clinical trials, similar idea. So if you envision yourself doing a lot of clinical trials, either investigator initiated or as part of some industry sponsored ones, having a good team of clinical research coordinators that you can say, oh, we have this new trial, here's the information, help set it up, handle the site initiation visits, deal with figuring out how pharmacy is going to be involved, manage the IRBs and adverse event reporting and DSMBs. All of that is incredibly time consuming for one person. So having a team of clinical trialists at your institution that can help manage that is very important and very useful. Some institutions will have specific clinical trial services where if you don't have a lot of this in your department, you can basically enlist their support. They will charge a certain amount of the money from the clinical trial to run it, but can take a lot of that off your plate. Okay, last couple things. So we'll talk about space and then we'll talk about the startup package. Space, like everything else, is going to come in two domains. One is for the lab and the other is for clinical things. So when you're negotiating your startup here, you're going to think about how much lab space you'll need to conduct the research that you want to do and what kind of lab space you would need. So that space, you have to envision that it's going to be big enough for all the personnel that you intend to hire or utilize. So that's graduate students, postdoctoral researchers, clinical research coordinators, RAs, yourself if you want to have a presence there. So a place to kind of sit down, and then bench space if you're doing wet work or anything that requires benches. Storage areas, so be able to place reagents or equipment when not in use. To get an idea for what kind of square footage this is, the National Fire Protection Association recommends about 100 square feet per person. For some benchmarking, people have found up to 200 square feet per person. So think about how big your lab is going to be in number of people, and then multiply it by 100 or 200, and that gives you a rough estimate of how much space you might need. When you're thinking about different actual physical places for this, keep in mind the infrastructure you'll need. So if you are doing a lab that needs gas lines like oxygen, or carbon dioxide or anything else, you need make sure the gas lines are already there. You don't want to have to pay to install them, or if you need vacuum. Make sure it has Ethernet. Some places will actually charge you to install the ports and then access to the ports every week or month. So be prepared for that. Maybe budget it into your startup later. If you need fume hoods, make sure those are available. Make sure there's a ventilation system. And make sure that it's a secured area with badge access or some other way to sort of keep all the priceless gear that you're buying and personnel safe. It's also useful when you're getting your IRBs or IACUC protocols that you are able to say that your laboratory has some sort of protection or security with it. Another feature that is nice is proximity. So if you can get a lab space that is close to the vivarium, if you're doing animal work, that can be nice. Make sure that the place you're going to is able to take care of those animals that you're working with. So if you're doing rodent research, that's usually no problem. But if you're doing large animals like sheep or pigs or non-human primates, make sure that the department or university setting can handle that and has experience with it and has an existing colony perhaps. And if you can get it close to your clinic or OR, that could be really good. It could save a lot of time. On the other hand, I know some people who have laboratories that are on the other end of town from where the hospital is, and they actually prefer that because when they're at their lab space, they're not going to be buttonholed by someone asking for clinical advice as they're walking around. They can really devote themselves just to the research side of things. It's a good way to compartmentalize. When you're asking for all this space, like everything else, you have to understand how that is being paid for. Usually these spaces are being paid for by indirects. And by that, we mean that when you apply for a grant from the NIH or National Science Foundation, there's the grant money you ask for in direct costs. So to pay personnel salaries, to buy reagents, to pay for animals or data storage. And then above and beyond that, the institution will charge some additional percentage, a surplus, that they call indirect fees. So that depends on institutions. Some are 60%, some are 90%, but they'll basically give more money from the NIH to your institution to cover this overhead. So kind of get an idea for what this is going to mean for you in terms of like how much your space is actually going to require for indirects. Some places are just happy to give you a space if there's lots of lab space around. Others will nickel and dime you for every little less square foot that you're using. So get an idea for what that's going to look like when you're thinking about how much space you want. When you first start up, you're not often going to have grant funding unless you're very fortunate. So if the institution charges you indirect fees for a lab space and you don't have indirect fees, you need to know how that's going to be covered. Often the departments will either build in indirect fees to your startup package or waive them for a particular amount of time to help get you off on your feet when you're applying for grants. Another way is to embed yourself in a more established lab. So if you're fortunate enough to go to a setting where there are these really well-established labs that are synergistic with your research goals, you might be able to partner with them as a mentor, utilize their resources, their lab space. It's a good way to get your personnel, like your grad students or postdocs, to mingle with other really smart grad students and postdocs in a bigger lab setting. But when you do that, be attentive to the fact that you are in someone's lab at that point, and you need to have an off ramp. So you need to know of a way that you're going to be able to get out of there and become independent at some point. So either think ahead of that, have frank discussions with that mentor, make sure that they know that your goal is not to always be their kind of sort of a sub part of their lab, but actually to eventually branch off and get your own, and make sure that they are going to help you succeed in that. So the clinical part of things, so the clinical space, kind of get an idea early on for how many clinic rooms you're going to have, what days of clinic you're going to do, if possible. Know in advance that Mondays and Fridays are often canceled because of holidays in the United States, which could be good if you don't want to do a lot of clinics. So you might want to put your clinic on a Monday. Similarly with block time, because Mondays and Fridays are often canceled, if you want to do a lot of surgery, having a Monday or Friday block time is not as good as some other days necessarily. you want a reliable block time, but at the same time, the hospital really doesn't want an empty operating room. That's just hemorrhaging money. So when you start, they're not going to give you block time because you're not going to have cases to book unless you're in a rarefied situation. They usually make you prove that you are getting cases to book. And then once you do that, they will give you the block time. Trust me, they want you to be doing as many cases as possible because that's how they generate revenue. So when it comes to the time that you are booking a lot of cases and you need to get them on, they will give you that time because they're losing money if they don't. But you really have to just prove and kind of give to them the idea of how much you need it, and then they'll hand it to you. So last part of it, and last little poll, what is a good startup package size? So when you're starting a new job somewhere and you're asking for money from the chairperson, how much are you going to ask for? So probably thus far the most disparate group of answers I've seen. Very almost a uniform distribution of where people are figuring, but a lot of big numbers there. People swinging for the fences, which is great. So when you're starting your new position, you most likely are not going to have an existing grant unless you are lucky enough to get a K-99 or something like that. So what the institution wants to do is give you some pot of money that you can then use to get your research program off the ground and then start applying for your own independent grants, either from the NIH, NSF, DARPA, DOD, or whatever, so that you can then become independent from them. So that's the purpose of these. When you're asking for that amount of money, whether it's the people that wanted more than 1.5 million or the people that wanted 250,000, it behooves you to be as detailed as possible with that budget. And the reason to do that is it helps to demonstrate to the people that you're asking this money for that you are mature and that you are thinking about exactly what you would need very practically and concretely to succeed. So if you can get to the point where you're, quoting like, this much money for a MATLAB license and this much money for this reagent for 3 years, that shows that you have planned ahead for that amount of time and really have thought about exactly what it needs to succeed. And then if they offer something less than what you're asking for, it's very easy to show them as part of this negotiation what the ramifications of that are. So if you ask for something of, let's say some random number, and then they say, well, we have to cut that in half, you can point to your budget spreadsheet and show, well, if I cut this by half, that means I would have to have 2 fewer postdocs or not buy this large piece of equipment or not have animals. And then you can either brainstorm ways to make up for that. So maybe they can include personnel salaries from a different pot of money that's not the startup. So that can happen sometimes, or they can find ways to use equipment from existing labs that you could borrow or share, or ways to get donations from other philanthropic things or endowments. Basically, any way to either make up that part, or if they really can't give it to you, then you have to ask yourself if you can still be successful if you don't have what you're asking for. And if not, then start looking for other positions. When you're planning that startup, think about personnel that you need. There's lab managers, research assistants, postdocs, grad students. They all have different salaries, and they all have fringe costs, which are things like insurance, benefits that are above and beyond their salary, quite significant percentages of that. And sometimes recruitment costs, you might want to bill in or fit in a little bit of that to attract some top talent. To get an idea of what those salaries might be, you can contact the institution and say that you're starting a job there. What are the typical postdoc salaries or whatever? And they're usually pretty good about giving that to you. For equipment, you can just reach out to the equipment vendors and ask for quotes. They're more than happy to give those, and usually pretty quickly, so you can get a really accurate idea for how much the equipment will cost. And then there's research cores. So if you have a cell core or an imaging core, or a statistics service that you might want to utilize, you can kind of budget all that in there too. And those places are happy to give you quotes as well, even before you start. And then think about the computers and software you might need. Some institutions will have free software. So some will have, MATLAB for free. Almost all have Microsoft Office products for free. But think about what you need and make sure that that's budgeted in there too. Like everyone might need EndNote in your lab, for instance. And then don't forget to budget in cost of living adjustments. So when you're thinking about this and you're making a 3 to 5 year budget, know that salaries will increase, the cost of reagents will increase. We had this period of really extensive inflation, and that can eat into your startup package if you're not asking for that in advance. For instance, our postdoc salaries where I am went up 20% recently, which is far outside of that cost of living adjustment. But if you have some baseline, it makes it a little easier to eat that. And then figure out when you're asking for the startup package, if the institution is going to charge indirects on that. Some of them will treat that startup package as any other grant and want indirects out of it. If they do, make sure that your startup package is then added on to above and beyond that to take care of that indirect. You don't want to actually have 50% of your startup disappear or evaporate due to indirect costs. And then also ask about the funds and whether they expire. So some places will give you a startup package for 3 years, and then if it's unused, take it back. You do not want that. You want to have it in perpetuity. So if you are really successful and you get 2 R01s in your first year, and are able to use those rather than your startup, that your startup stays there as a rainy day fund for when you need in the future, because at some point you'll fall on lean times. And then also make sure that you know when these startup funds are going to be released. Usually if it's a really big package, they'll give you some chunk the first year, some chunk the second year, and make sure that what they're giving you aligns with how you think you're going to spend it. Like if you have a lot of capital expenditures the first year, like equipment, make sure that you have that money doled out in the first year so you can support that. So kind of to wrap this all up, the main takeaway is that your employer who's hiring you wants you to succeed. They want you to be a great neurosurgeon who's doing a lot of high quality cases and bringing in revenue for the department, and also getting grants and getting high profile papers. That's what they want. That's why they are hiring you and not someone who does not do research. They are going to put a lot of money into that, into you and the program that you're trying to build. But you need to be to tell them, to articulate exactly what you need in order to do all these things that you're dreaming of and they're dreaming of. So that might be, your startup package. That might be the space you need to do these cutting edge experiments. The more you think about exactly what this pathway is going to look like, and the more you understand it and really can visualize it, the better you can argue for what you want and convince them that giving it to you will help you realize all these the dreams that you have. So understand what you need, articulate that throughout the process, and then find some position that can give you that to help you reach your full potential. So with that, there's some resources. So this is the paper that Greg mentioned at the top. Just got out in JNS not too long ago. There's also another one about contract negotiation, more for anybody that's a neurosurgeon rather than just neurosurgeon, neuroscientist. That was pretty good in 2020 in neurosurgery. And with that, happy to take any questions at any time that anyone may have.
Thanks, John. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Okay, great. That was great. Let's definitely open it up for questions, see if what people have to ask, clarify.
I have more of a comment. John, that was an amazing talk, and I have personally benefited a lot from John's help because I was in his lab, and then when I was doing my job search, he helped me a ton. But I can't emphasize enough having that detailed budget and plan that Dr. Rolston mentioned. It was really key to me getting the startup package that I did. It's pretty amazing. I mean, if you just do your homework and research, the people that are on campus, like truly take a deep dive into their PubMed and identify mentors ahead of time and really put like a proposal down that could get R01 funding, people will read that, like the School of Medicine, deans and whatnot. You might catch someone's eye, and they have the power to give you the startup package and the support. But it really gives them confidence if you do have it down to like, how much is the MATLAB license at the institution you're trying to get the job at? It just shows, it gives you a good idea of how much money you truly need, and it shows that you've done your homework. And I've been actually really struck by how impressed they were that my proposal was down to that detail, and they noticed it. So I just wanted to reiterate that. I think that's super important.
Yeah, I think I would be much more likely to give someone $872,006 than $1 million. Like if they don't have any other thing except for I want $1 million for my startup. That just seems more like they're just guessing a number rather than actually having thought about it. So
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Oh, no, I actually want to hear whether you agree with that or not. I'm not a chair yet, so.
Yeah, I totally agree. If it's in, I think if it's in kind of a standard range, like an acceptable standard range, then I think it's not having a detailed budget can be okay, as long as it's kind of in the standard range. But if you're going to go high, or your research is particularly expensive for some reason, the more detail you provide, absolutely, that's going to be convincing.
All right. So Dan in the chat says, as a new faculty, how or where do you recruit postdocs or technicians? This is very personal, but so when I've been able to find postdocs, it's mostly been through social media or word of mouth. So letting all of my collaborators at my institution know that I'm looking for a postdoc. That's why I found probably one of my best ones is that she was graduating from one of my collaborators' labs from her PhD, and then came to mine for a postdoc, and that was wonderful. But everyone knew that I was looking, so that was kind of word of mouth. Other times I've just posted on like Twitter or LinkedIn and gotten some really good dynamite applications. Probably about like 20 to 1 or maybe 50 to 1 of like bad applications to good ones. But that's how I've done it. There are ways to pay for Society for Neuroscience to do ads or other journals to do ads. Those can cost money. But that's, I think, one of the good ways. And then if you, to play the long game, if you start, when you start your position, it's okay to volunteer to be on thesis committees for PhDs. And that's a good way to get to know your environment, but also to get good relationships with some grad students, especially if they're really strong ones. You can even float the idea at some point, like, oh, this is a great PhD you've done. By the way, I'm looking for postdocs. For technicians, the only way I found, the best way I found is actually advertising on the website for the university or hospital. That tends to be frequented more for those kind of roles, at least in my experience. When I put postdoc job listings on the university site, never get anything from it, but technicians, research assistants, clinical research coordinators get a lot of hits from that. I think that's going to be different for everybody, but that's my experience.
I think as a junior investigator, when you're just getting started the first year or two, if you're associated with another bigger lab with a bigger name, and they know it, and you could even have them co-mentored by the big name while they're primary mentored by you, that's a good strategy to recruit in your first couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you, if you're at a place where you get grad students, even then I would suggest for the first few years, at least, to encourage any student that wants to work with you to also identify a co-mentor in the university. It'll help them as a graduate students get grants, so it's easier to get an F31 or an F30 if one of your mentors is established and has a track record for training, because you won't, because you're just starting. And it can help in that recruitment part by knowing that there's a project where there's a safer, established person and this newer, potentially more exciting person as well. I see another question. So do you have any thoughts, advice on evaluating infrastructure access to compute cloud resources for more computationally intensive work? Yeah, so almost all institutions now will have their own computational core or cluster or something that you can get access to. So you can look at the rates for that. Although some now are actually outsourcing that to like Amazon, AWS, or Azure or some of the others. Many of those now have licenses where you can do IRB protected or PHI protected information on them, and that's still okay. So kind of get a feel to talk to people who are doing that at the institution, see what their mode is, whether they've built their own cluster or they're using the one supported by the university, or whether they've outsourced it to Google or Amazon. But kind of get a feel for what the local thing is. And with that,
Hey, John.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Is there
Let's
another
say-
question, or? I was gonna say, let me just make one last comment, and then maybe we'll kind of adjourn. The one thing I heard at the very, very beginning about when to start looking for a job, I always make this advice for especially for surgeon scientists, for other areas as well. But I think you can start before your last year of training, whatever that is, chief residency or fellowship. There is definitely a phenomenon where if where they don't know they need somebody, they may be, they feel a little bit stretched clinically, or they're realizing that they want to go in a certain area, from a research perspective, but they haven't really put it all together. And then they get an email from somebody who's got everything that they're looking for, with, proper training, reference and things. And all of a sudden, and if they have a year and a half to act on that, they have time to put things together and then ultimately create a position for you. So I've definitely seen that. I kind of think I even benefited from that, when I did this way back when. So I just want to put that out there. It's not like every place is screaming for somebody. Sometimes they're, you know what, we're getting a little volume is going up on tumors. We need to advance our tumor research program. Oh, I got this great CV from this person from so-and-so with a great reference. Maybe we can start putting the pieces together. In a year and a half, they can get that together. So starting early doesn't hurt. And you can create a job that's otherwise not even there. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
Any comments on that, John?
Yeah, totally agree. So I think, 1 to 2 years before you're finishing up. So that would, like, a 2-year mark would be early, but totally fair game. And I think that there's kind of 2 broad categories of jobs. There's jobs that are like that we know we need someone and we probably need them soon. And then there's the ones that are like, well, we could probably use somebody, but we can also bide our time for a little bit. But if someone comes by and has a really compelling CV, then you can make a space for them on the earlier side, or kind of cobble together resources if you have the time for it. So it's not going to hurt you to start early.
All right. Well, John, thank you very, very much for doing
thank
this
you.
for us.
Yeah.
Learned a lot. And thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hope everybody has a happy holiday. And then we'll look out for early January. We'll be getting out what the webinar series will look like in 2024. So everybody have a good night. Thanks so much.